Hey, I've got Dave Rizor on here with me from Topeka, Kansas. He's at Northland Christian Church, the senior pastor there, and he is the senior pastor of one of our coaching clients in our Exceptional Every Sunday coaching program, Jack, and his worship leader. And Jack's been in the program for a few months now, and Dave is kind enough to sit down and let me pick his brain from a senior pastor's point of view. So Dave, thanks so much for being on here.
Thanks for having me, John. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So what I'd love to do is just kind of get your perspective on, why you invested in Jack and what made you decide to go with our coaching. There's lots of great worship coaching out there for worship leaders. And then, some of the hurdles that a lot of churches face is like, how do we fund this? So I'd love to, hear from that. So do you mind, I'd love though, just for people to get to know you first, do you mind just kind of sharing with me a little bit about you, your family, how long you've been at Northland and so forth?
Yeah. Really appreciate that. So I'm married, been married for about 16 years now, and I have 3 kids, and that is my first ministry. It's what I love to be able to do. And we've been in ministry in Kentucky, and then we moved to Northland about 6 years ago as the lead pastor. And it came with a lot of different responsibilities than I had my previous jobs. And yet still leadership was always going to be the thing that you needed to kind of hold on to. And so I've been here for about 6 years. The last couple of years have been some of the most difficult years in ministry, just beyond that with COVID and other things. But having Jack here, Jack was a part of our team when I got here, our worship leader, and he's transitioned from a couple of roles to get to where he's at now. But we love our place. We love our home and our ministry here.
Great. So talk to me about kind of the process leading up to Jack joining our coaching group. Was it something he was exploring, something you guys were talking together? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so we were in a particular spot where Jack is a little bit younger, and he moved from an internship to a student ministry role. And then as we were transitioning worship leaders, we just kind of looked at Jack and said, man, we would really like for you to consider this option, even from an interim standpoint, and knowing that he was a young leader. And he said, I don't necessarily want to look at it from an interim standpoint. I actually would like to consider it as a full-time responsibility, which told us a couple of things. One, he was fully invested. And number 2, we've got to train this guy up. We've got to work hard to allow this guy to really grow into the type of worship leader we were looking for, not just on stage, but the kind of guy who would develop people around him to be leaders, to live out their ministry. So over the course of the last couple of years, I worked with him, our executive pastor worked with him in some leadership traits, but somewhere along the way, we just happened to recognize there's just certain limitations to what we do and what we know. And particularly, I don't have a background in leading worship, neither did our executive pastor. And we had leadership traits and abilities, but our capacity to help someone in a very particular skill set was limited. And so yet there was a need for growth with Jack. And so we just kind of started saying, okay, if we can't supply that for him, we would still want him to have that ability to come alongside of somebody else. So I think about 6 months ago, I just proposed it to him as an idea. Won't you start looking at options? And he had 2 or 3 different options that came up. And I saw this option as well and tossed it his way. And of all of them, he picked this one. And I think one of the primary reasons was it fit into what we were looking for, someone who could help train up, equip, and fill the gap that myself and my executive pastor was not able to fill. I would maybe add one other thing to that, John, is beyond that, sometimes you get trained up underneath somebody. So if there's a quick vacancy like what we had, if there wasn't a quick vacancy, there would have been somebody there kind of training, equipping, and walking with you. And that happens in most arenas of life. You get some sort of orientation with those in front of you at the work site. Jack didn't have that. In a lot of places I've been to, they don't have that. You get kind of thrown in and then you've got to make it up right on the spot. So if you've not been around maybe a larger context or a context where 2 or 3 worship leaders are, or there's a high developmental culture, it's just really hard to come by. And that was another reason for that.
Yeah, no, that's good. I just see so many worship leaders that do get thrown into that without, and even if it was a situation where they were part of the team before, the leader that went before him didn't really develop them intentionally in that way. And, maybe they weren't thinking or whatever, but that's just so huge to say, okay, yeah, there really needs to be that orientation, that building up of younger leaders. Just for context, so people know, how old is Jack right now? He's 27?
25, maybe.
25? Okay.
Yeah, just out of college.
Yeah. Just had a baby too. So let's just complicate life even more, right?
Yeah.
That's great. So, and one of the things I just love about Jack is, he is so, he just, whatever we talk about, he does, he just applies it. And there's, and just I've talked to a lot of guys his age, and they kind of, it's that youthful arrogance that we all had, at some level.
Oh yeah.
I just don't see that with Jack, and he's just really diving in. So it's really fun to work with him, but
it makes it a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. What were some of the things, that you feel comfortable about as far as sharing, some of the things that Jack needed to work on, and focused on?
Yeah, no, Jack was skilled musician from a vocal standpoint and a personal standpoint. That's why he was able to lead. But when it came to the administrative side, behind the scenes, and the onboarding process of a potential new person kind of coming in, how to say yes, how to say no, and even how to grade his team, those are things that he didn't have like this I'll say framework to work within. He had an idea, but yet, as you well know, sometimes when you work with your ideas, and even if you're appropriating somebody else's ideas, it doesn't always go as planned. And so there's a few times Jack would say something and somebody would take it wrong. And how do you let somebody down when they should? You would think it's easy to say you're not great at drums or you're not there yet, but how do you say that? And so walking through that, or how do you help coach people and help them see and understand the culture in a way that lets everybody know what the expectations are, and we're all on the same page as far as mission, vision, values, and then even the extra work needed to go into a weekend. So Jack had all the skill set to do his job, but what he did not have was the framework to work the administrative side. And that was the area we kept seeing a little shortfalls in communication between him and, let's say, a keyboard or a drummer or someone else, or even when he onboarded or had to remove somebody. He wasn't confident in those areas because this is his very first time doing it. And it was a tough thing. I get that. I actually resonate with that. When it's your first time, you don't know what you don't know. And so Jack not knowing in those particular settings, he didn't know what gaps he was missing with some people. And in some areas, he just didn't have confidence. And so this really has helped him get a framework to get confidence, and then have the ability to look even in advance and say, okay, I can see where I need to start helping, even with my time, my energy, to help get the best out of our weekend experience. And even beyond that, how to develop the team.
Yeah, that's great. I want to dive into, some of the changes that you've seen in Jack. But before we do that, I'd love to just kind of hear, as you said, okay, these are, this is the program you looked at, Jack looked at it as well. Were there any specifics that you're like, hey, this is why we said yes to this one versus maybe some of the other ones?
I think when we looked at this one, it had a lot of history, and I'm going to say this, there was a developing, and this is part of what you created, John, is just a culture around it where people were we heard from other people. This is a great resource. And it just happened to be that it was very personal, that we felt like Jack needed a personal touch. As you said earlier, he's somebody who is humble and wants to listen. But when he gets to see somebody eyeball to eyeball, as opposed to just walking through like a 12-step program, and that's probably a bad example, but just to have a few steps and just kind of walk through, let's say like even like a classroom-like setting, that's going to be good and helpful. But that personal interaction was a thing that he was really looking forward to seeing, and somebody who wasn't just looking for the latest and greatest trendy type of ideas.
Yeah.
But actually going a step further. This is what I remember Jack saying, is like, this isn't just something that's going to make me a better musician. It's going to make me a better leader for musicians. It's going to help me in this way. And it's not that I need to have, skinny jeans and I guess long hair or whatever, like those things don't even matter.
Yeah.
It's about development. And that's what Jack was looking for.
Yeah, I always joke that we focus on the uncool side of worship, so it's leadership development, the team stuff, and all that.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. I mean, I could get a pair of jeans from Old Navy. Okay, you can't get somebody who knows that stuff.
Yeah, that's it is, and that's one of the things I struggled with coming up through as a worship leader was, I went to these conferences and everything was geared on, hey, how to lead good this Sunday, or, making your team sound better for Sunday or whatever. And I realized, I'm like, man, there's just so much need to focus on the worship ministry leadership side of it, not just the worship leader side of it. So that's good. I appreciate that insight there. So what kind of changes or just progress have you seen with Jack through this time?
Yeah, I'll say there's quite a bit, actually. So the first would be working within the white margin spaces. Jack has learned to structure his time not based off of the urgent and important, the ever-present need to get Sunday ready. Jack's actually thought forward thinking for the first time since we've came on. I mean, it was a lot to keep up, and you feel like you're drinking from a fire hydrant, yet this, the weekend's always coming. And so that pressure comes along and there's always something to work on. But Jack started working on things outside of that gave him even a higher ability and capacity to actually lead beyond just the weekend. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I noticed very quickly was that Jack was given tools for assessing inside of his band, or even those coming on for the onboarding. And that set of tools came with, here's what you would say if that person, you can kind of check off the box if they don't make it, or if they're almost there, or if they do make it. These are the things that would be just a framework to build that conversation. And I remember very distinctly kind of an example of that. Jack had somebody who was very excited about wanting to get on the team, and they're going to help us out. There's this big need, and you said there's a need, and I can play guitar. And so he got up, and there's a guy who's highly involved, but he did not sound well. Very enthusiastic. And Jack had a confidence that he's never had, because he went through a few things that you provided, just tools that would help him. And he had a great conversation. And this told me the story. This guy came back to our church the next week and followed up with Jack, and was able to continue a conversation relationship, even though Jack let him down. That's not always been the case. You tell somebody no, and man, they are, we'll see you. You don't want my talents. I'm going to go somewhere else. But Jack was able to do that in a way that actually continued a relationship. And then he felt pretty good. And I would say the backside of that story is Jack's had some hard conversations with people in the past, and they didn't go that way. Now, this isn't meaning that you gave him like a recipe for success every single time. Okay. It's not, not like we've got a silver bullet here. He was just more confident and more prepared. And I was very impressed with that.
Yeah.
Now, the third thing I've noticed is that Jack prepares his team differently, just all the way around. He feels like he knows what it looks like to win going into a weekend, from a communication standpoint, from an expectation around showing up to rehearsal, and some other things that quite honestly, he was hoping people would make it to rehearsal, but he didn't actually fully set a tone for that. And so he's got a pretty good idea of what that looks like. and he's listening for things that I could never coach them on. I used to sit in some of those rehearsals thinking, yeah, we all sound pretty good. We're going to be great this weekend. And then they would come back and say, the worst rehearsal ever. Well, when you're not a musician, when you don't know, yeah, people sound better than they actually are. And so Jack knew when they were not missing, or when they were missing their cues, or they weren't prepared, or they weren't ready, or they weren't, and he knew how to coach them. And I think that's the thing I've noticed, that he knows what he's looking for.
That's great. Yeah, we do wins every time we meet, and some of his wins have just, I mean, like this last one was like, hey, I got 4 new people on my team, and he was like super confident that they were, qualified, and I'm like, dude, that's awesome. And so he just takes action, and that's fantastic. So, one of the things I'd love to ask, and this is going off the beaten path a little bit, but as you think about, as the senior leader, you think about the staff or team that you have, and you're developing them, what are some of the things that you're looking for as you want to develop them? If you're going to invest in, sorry, my kids they're home and I've got a basement office, so it's pounding and things like that. But, whether someone, buys into our program or any other program, I just think, I think hearing from a senior pastor on what are the things you're thinking about as you're looking to invest in something to better any of your staff people, any of your team.
Yeah. So let me just say this. I understand that there's certain abilities and responsibilities I have, and then there's certain limitations. Yet for me as leader, I feel like my highest priority outside of just teaching and pastoring, right, is leading my team. And I want them to live out their calling. And that's what I feel like is my calling, to help them live out their calling. And so at some level, I got to look at that in a very humble way, saying I'm going to do my very best to create a culture of health and growth, and a place where people can thrive. In fact, I'll say this, I hope people take less money at times, meaning they're willing to take a shot on our church and say, I'm willing to, not necessarily because money is a thing, but like, I want to work there because of the culture more than finances. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
And I think that was kind of the idea for me when we went into this process, and even thinking about Jack. I want Jack to live out his calling in a way that God has designed him. The idea that God created Jack, or any worship leader, with a specific purpose. And it's not just to hold a guitar or play keys or sing, man, it's to glorify him. And so when we get into church, that's where it gets tough sometimes, because we get all these extra things that come along, and it can be very difficult. So creating that culture where it's okay to grow, to learn, to even fail along the way is important to me. And it helps me see not only here and now, but actually the future. I think as a lead pastor, my goal and my job is to also communicate vision. It's to get in front of things, to actually project out and say, okay, this is where we're going to some extent. Now, with guys like Jack or any other worship leader, my hope is that they're on the journey with us for the long haul. But in the meantime, if they're not, even then, I'm going to do my very best to help them grow, because it's a kingdom mindset that says, man, their calling goes way deeper than one church. And so, again, me wanting to help see him grow. When one person on the team grows like this, the rest of the team grows as well. And this is another side to that. When Jack is living out his calling at 24, 25, well, then our student pastor is looking down the hallway saying, man, what's this guy got that I don't have? Like, he is stepping his game up, coming into conversations and leadership team meetings and other things. So then it elevates our total leadership capacity because somebody else is growing. And here's the thing, in a very humble way, I'll just say this, as much as God has equipped me to be a good leader, I have a lot of limitations in my leadership. And that's where I look to guys like you, John, and others, and say, man, I'm excited about the work you're doing, because it helps me and it helps our team, simply because it fills a gap that I cannot fill myself. And so I do believe it helps create that healthy, create creates a healthy culture where people can thrive and grow, and it elevates the team.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate there's two things there that I just want to say, because we've got two folks right now in my coaching group right now who are, one already left and the other is out the door if he finds another job, just because of the culture. And it's senior pastor. So to hear, and right now, if you look any church news, you're seeing the abusive nature of some church leadership, cultures and different things like that. And so just to hear, that you guys are saying, hey, we want to invest, we don't want to be the only voice in someone's ear, helping them. And just creating that kingdom mindset of like, hey, we want to be on the journey, but it's also investing in, who knows what he's going to do down the road.
That's right.
So that's fantastic. And just the thing about upping the rest of the staff, I'm always excited when any of our clients come back and they go, yeah, we're pretty much the most organized ministry in the church. And it's coming from the music person who's usually the most scattered and everything. So
I get that.
But yes, but definitely I just want to, say thanks to you, Dave, for creating that culture for not just Jack, but your whole team to thrive in, because it's real. The abusive culture out there, and not even abusive at times, but that's not healthy. And it can.
Yeah, there's been a lot. I've experienced some of that in my own past, and the perfectionist side of things. If you are not missing marks, if you're doing things and there's very little room for error, and all of a sudden, man, that pressure builds up and you get anxious and then you get depressed, and it's tough, man. And I see a lot of guys who, and gals too. I mean, I'm both ways. They can't handle it, and it's tough. And so my hope and desire is to help people live out their calling. Well, if that's my role as lead pastor, then I've got to create that healthy culture for them to do that here.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And from what Jack says, it sounds like a great place to work. So that's good. Thank you for that. One thing I want to touch on too is would love to talk about your church's decision as far as part of the decision obviously was financial. Can we afford this? Should we invest in this? For context, can you let us know like the average weekly attendance at your church so people kind of know what size of church you're at?
Yeah, right now we are just kind of right there at 500 people on average every week. Yeah.
Okay, great. So you're definitely in that, I call it the awkward size church, where you've got you can have some staff, got great programs, but yet that critical, mass of
still relying on volunteers, and some people expect it to be in kind of a small church setting, and others kind of see the large side of things. Yeah, it's that middle school type of mentality.
Yeah. And so investing in a coaching program like this isn't just a automatic, like, oh yeah, we have the funds for it. What was some of the questions and things that you had to wrestle through as you thought about this?
Yeah, so as we just started evaluating our staff and what they're doing, and even their limitations and abilities and potential capacity. I mean, you look at all those things. And over the last couple of years, even with COVID, we were not able to go on as many, conferences and big trips like that. And it really kind of helped us rethink, okay, what would be a better investment of our time and energy and resources? I mean, it's great to get away for a week, but sometimes that can cost quite a bit of money. And if you're going somewhere and you're taking a lot of time. And so we just started evaluating all those things. And then we were looking at the type of people that God was providing for us. And quite honestly, Jack was on that list of people who is younger, yet has a load of capacity. And so we said all of those things lining up. We thought, man, we really do want to build into and invest into one of our most valuable resources, if not the most valuable, which is our staff. And so Jack was high on that list of people we want to see grow. And so we looked at finances. Yeah, it's actually been some pretty lean years, just in related to COVID and all the transitions that have taken place. Yet we still felt like, man, if we were going to allocate funds towards someone growing in this particular skill set and ability to lead, well, that's going to pay back some level of dividend, so to speak. He's going to help our team and even grow our team. And so we just looked at it and said, man, this is a pretty easy decision as it relates to the type of decision. But going to work on the budget, yeah, that was pretty tough. And so in that, there was kind of a two-way street on that. Jack had to be able to give up some things, like we're not going to a conference this year. And we had to say, okay, we're going to take funds from something else to help fill that gap. And then by a combination of both of them, we were able to help make this possible. And we knew it was the right cost. But again, there was between two budget items trying to make that possible. And it just so happened that we think it was the best way to spend our money and our resources.
Nice. I love how you made that, something where Jack had some skin in the game too. Like, hey, because I love going to conferences and I still do. But it's like, okay. And I think they can be a great investment in that kind of shot in the arm, that just, refreshing type of thing. But like you said, it's like, man, their travel costs, hotels, everything with that, it can add up. So I love that you let him, kind of share in some of that, that investment. And I appreciate what you said as far as knowing that, hey, it is going to pay back dividends. In the church, we don't have the luxury of saying, hey, we put $1 in, we get $2 out, like in the business world or whatever. Unless we're talking about offering, but it doesn't work that way.
Just praying. We were just praying. Okay. No, I get it.
Yeah. So that's insight is very helpful. And I think that could help other churches too, even think through like, all right, how do we maybe take from a few areas and for a short-term time and even have the leader himself or herself.
Yeah, and I would just add to this. You're going to pay money either way to help someone grow. And that could be, or to find somebody who's already grown. And so our mentality has been, we realize we're not going to get people from churches of 10,000 people to come here and just really, have a skill set there. And so when we look at the type of people we're looking at, they're going to be a little bit younger and maybe not have that skill set. But if they're humble, if they're hungry and they want to grow, man, we can provide a place for that. And so this is one of the things I loved about this, is that because we weren't able to get those types of people, we just realized, man, we can help grow up those types of people within our context of our church. And we want to be a place for people to grow. So it really does. And Jack would want this skill set. And we've seen this in the past. And I've worked with a lot of churches. Sometimes when people don't see it, well, they realize, man, if I went to that church just down the road that's a little bit larger and has more musicians, then I could get trained up in a way that I hope to. Well, there's a possibility you wouldn't be trained up at all, but that's a possibility that you're willing to take. So people take a risk on that. And we just looked at it and said, man, we've got to do a better job trying to train up people here, utilizing the resources we have. And so, and I think it actually has helped us, and it's prolonged even a guy like Jack being on staff here for several years longer without flaming out, so to speak, because he's hitting his head against the wall and nobody could help him. In no way are we trying to say we've got a great bargain on Jack, in any way. We're trying to pay him to the best of our ability and only have plans to increase that.
That's so good, just because, one, you already knew Jack, you already knew his heart.
Yeah.
And so to know that, okay, let's invest in him rather than go out and try to put this money towards maybe a few more dollars in an annual salary.
Right.
So it's a great, I love your mindset there. And one of our big things here is what we just short-term call E4 leadership, is the Ephesians 4, 11 and 12 is, hey, we want to equip these leaders to understand that it's about shared leadership. It's about sustainable leadership. And then it's equipping the team to help do the work of ministry. So, and it sounds like you guys have a similar heart with discipleship at your church as well. And So I think it's been a great fit. So, Dave, man, I just thank you so much for spending this time. I know you've given so much here to other senior leaders who, needed to hear some perspective, from other than a worship guy like me. So I appreciate that a ton. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been an honor, and thank you for what you do to serve and invest in our church here at Northland. Really appreciate that, John.
Thank you.